For those of you who are from here, it's wonderful to see you. I'm Becky Anderson, the managing editor of CNN, based in Abu Dhabi, and the host of Connect the World with Becky Anderson, which is our primetime news show from here every night of the week. It's wonderful to be here amongst friends and new friends gathered with us today. It was the best of times. It was the worst of times. I'm sure many of you recognize that iconic opening from Dickens, A Tale of Two Cities. Don't worry, this isn't a deep dive into Victorian literature today, nor is it going to be a pub quiz, as it were. There won't be a quiz at the end of this. I prepared for today's session, and as I did that, that line struck me as a perfect reflection of where we are at today. On the one hand, rapid technological advancements are completely transforming our lives and disrupting the old ways of doing things. We are seeing unprecedented access to knowledge and to education, often just with the tap of our phones. The AI revolution, of course, is already here, and cities like Dubai and Abu Dhabi are leading the charge into the future. On the other hand, of course, we are grappling with what is a really fractured geopolitical landscape, which has really, I think, shaken our faith in the global order. And this makes it harder for all of us as a collective to tackle economic uncertainty, existential threats like climate change, and how we just continue to look to the future and take a sort of forward-leaning approach to things. So the question is, how do we navigate these opposing forces? How does a future-focused country like the UAE craft strategies that not only ensure that this country survives, but thrives in this complex reality? And how does a successful UAE cascade through this region and beyond? Because there is such an opportunity to navigate a new Middle East, look to a new architecture for this region, and the UAE sits at the very heart of that potential success. What lessons can we draw from discussions happening both here at the Global Futures Councils and at similar initiatives that many of us are part of? Well, I know that my panel today is going to help us out with all of that. Her Excellency Sarah Al-Amiri is the Minister of Education here at in the UAE. Her Excellency Mariam Al-Hamadi is the Minister of State, the Secretary General of the Cabinet of the UAE. Thank you for joining us both today. Danny Kwa is the Dean and Lee Ka Shing Professor in Economics at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, the National University of Singapore in Singapore. That's a really long title, isn't it, sir?
Sorry about
Mabruk. And Yuvin Naidu is the Distinguished Professor for Global Accounting, Risk and Agility at Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University, where I did my master's. So we are Sun Devils together, and it is wonderful for you to be here in the UAE. Thank you. I think the backdrop to where we are at present is the UAE's 2031 and 2071 plans, which provide what is, when you are here and working here, a very clear national roadmap. It's a comprehensive and very clear national roadmap to turn the vision of this country's leadership into a reality. Driving that vision is an incredibly ambitious set of strategies and goals across both the economy and society as a whole. That's a sort of backdrop to us being here and having this discussion today. I know that our guests here today will help us take a sort of wider lens to what is going on here against what are some real headwinds, both geo-economically and geopolitically. Minister Amiri, let me start with you. You've taken on the education portfolio here after what was an incredibly impressive period in advanced technology, and very visibly in the space sector. You famously led the UAE's maiden interplanetary mission to Mars. You have sat at the forefront of sort of cutting edge thought for so long. What does a cutting edge, knowledge-based economy mean to you? And how do we reimagine the way we approach education to ensure the workforce of tomorrow?
The word that comes to mind, Becky, is adaptability. Everything that you've mentioned, both from a long-term context, from the importance of the evolution, from being in a sector that's at the forefront of development, the core of technology, the core of the most cutting edge of industries across the world are the humans that drive it, and the intellectual capital that drives it, that uses the necessary tools to be able to create impact. I know we're in a world of AI and how to benefit from AI, but the adaptability that needs to be built into the fabric of our workforce that would uplift the entire sector growth and ensure sustainability needs to enhance our growth process. And that goes back into education. I know we've spoken quite extensively and worked with the World Economic Forum on reskilling, and a lot of countries around the world are tackling reskilling. To be able to have the reskilling dilemma become extinct, we need to go back further to students that are currently in the classroom, to the youngest of students that are currently in the classroom or coming into the classroom. We need to rethink how we approach our traditional education systems to ones that are built on skills, and skills that evolve, and value systems that uphold who we are as nations, who we are as global citizens, and what our role is in society and economy. And knowledge then becomes a means to the development of those skills. The first skill of utmost importance to be able to have reskilling go extinct is the ability to learn, unlearn, relearn, and continuously have that cycle. That skill becomes extremely important for students today. That by itself will transform the way educators approach teaching, the role of assessment within the classroom, the role of knowledge and the grasp of knowledge, and more importantly, the role of technology in the growth of education. That, of course, will fall in across various skills that needs to be enhanced with students, the value system, so that we're able to push forward a workforce that's highly adaptable, resilient, able to continuously learn from the environment and the world around them, but more importantly, harness the power of technology and AI to be able to drive growth and spur sustainable growth across economies.
Can I ask you what lessons you have brought to this portfolio from the work that you've done in the past, very specifically in the area of advanced technology?
The first is an understanding that technology is a tool and not the solution. How to use that tool in the right context becomes important. So today, when we're looking at AI in education, we've actually rethought what outcomes do we want to impart on our students. What does our student journey look like? What does the educator's journey look like? And we look at it from different perspectives. How does it look like from a student's lens, from a classroom lens, from an overall school lens, from a school ecosystem and a school system lens, and then from a parent lens and a household lens. And that today, we're working on developing the various tools that are necessary to be able to adapt to a changing world, to be able to provide the necessary knowledge and skills development, and be able to address and be more inclusive in terms of our education approach across the spectrum. It is through these mechanisms that we're identifying various aspects. Technology becomes one of many tools rather than the tool or the solution of choice to be able to drive education forward. That, more importantly, is actually an iterative process. It's not flat. We're used to education systems building curriculum standards and outcomes, developing and enhancing educators around it, and transforming the operation and governance of our schools and the way that they operate. This mechanism of ensuring that skills is continuously adaptable requires an iterative mechanism of implementation that upholds the outcomes that students need to learn, but more importantly, adapts to the changes around us through enhancing the skills.
Professor Danikwa, the minister's premise, it seems, at the heart of the disruption here and the ambition here is to make reskilling extinct. We were talking before we got here about changing the way we think about learning and lifelong learning to never graduating. What's your perspective about this? This is ambitious. We know AI disrupts. We know we live in a world of emerging technologies and advanced technologies. How does what the minister has just laid out as not just a vision, let me tell you, because there is ambition and strategy and goal, very specific goals behind this vision. How does that look from your perspective?
The first thing that strikes me coming in from the outside is how ambitious this plan is. And then the second thought is UAE is the place to make it happen. This is a place that has shown how it has constantly bucked the trend and surprised onlookers. Right? At a time early on, before AI became a thing out there, the UAE was already involved in deploying systems with customizability. Early on, before most of the world, early on, as most of the world looked on and realizes how the UAE sits in a sea of hydrocarbons, you're already making plans for the energy transition. You're already talking about moving to where most of your electricity will be generated by solar by 2050. Your entire supply chain is being reorganized around renewables. So it's constantly surprised on the upside. The idea of never graduating or lifelong learning is a driver to continue to have our people continue to have jobs, even as technology becomes better, so that in principle you could think of replacing them. But you realize that for a people to be in control of their own destiny, jobs hugely important, and you've got to provide them an employability. So this is a wonderful imperative. I look on hugely impressed. It's a problem that other parts of the world, including my own, have tried to take on. Some parts are more successful than others. One thing that I might add into the mix, however, is like Singapore, the UAE has a relatively small population compared to the giants of the world. One thing we know about places, countries that have small populations is that other things equal, they tend to make too much of what their people can and not enough of what their people need. In other words, they find it difficult to diversify in a really complex and sustained way. And earlier, Becky, you were talking about how the world's geopolitical system is seeing disruption. My own quick follow-on thought is we need to be thinking about how that geopolitical disruption will change the operating environment, even as we have these ambitious plans for reskilling or not reskilling our people.
And what are these challenges?
Those challenges have to do with the disruption of the international trading system, a rollback of a rules-based order that allowed small nations like yours and mine to be able to stand toe-to-toe against all other nations in the world and be treated fairly in the international trading system. That there would be a set of rules that we could all operate under that were transparent. No one would be taken advantage of. The meat of the contest is economic competition. That drives all of us to perform better. That system is under attack in the world outside. That's a system that we all need to look to protect.
We'll talk about how we might work to better insulate against that, if that's the term. I'm not sure that you can insulate against what is going on outside, but at the moment, certainly there are projects that can be instigated in order to help that. Mariam El-Hamadi, Minister, let me bring you in here, because if you want to keep pace with the rate of change, you've got to be responsive from a regulatory perspective. If you want to execute on these these two visions, 2031, we are UAE, 2031, this is a decade's worth of project here, and through to the very ambitious vision for 2071. The regulatory environment needed to and will continue to need to be changed. What are you doing in the UAE to ensure that government is responding to the emerging tech and development issues that we've been talking about? And how do you ensure that you have the right regulation always and going forward?
Thank you, Becky. Let me tell you, Becky, that the most important competitive advantage for any country is to have the flexible, agile, and adaptable legislation system. How fast we can adopt the changes, how fast in the UAE we can adapt the customer needs, the global investor needs, the emerging technology needs. The faster we can adopt in the UAE, the more successful we are as a country. According to Thomson Reuters, every 7 minutes, there is update in the legislation somewhere around the world. IMD report 2024 said that UAE is second globally in the flexibility and agility of its legislation and policy system.
That was 2024?
24, yes.
Would you have got that same rating 5 years ago?
No.
No.
No. So let me give you the experience about our journey. Late 2020, early 2021, there was a direction from the leaders that we need to do a massive reform of our legislation system. And that's why we formed more than 200 teams, federal, local, private, investors, academia. They worked to us through 3 years up to now. Until now, we have updated more than 75% of our regulations.
In 3 years?
In 3 years. We have repealed more than 50 of our laws that is not anymore suitable for the current period. We have removed the bureaucracy in most of the laws, because while we are doing the update, we were looking to the laws and to see if their criteria for example, licensing or inspection, do we need them or we don't need them? Is it 70s or it is suitable for the now? This is actually what we did in our regulations. Let me give you some of the examples, if you allow me. In the economy, for example, we reduced the legal age of doing business from 21 to 18 because we need to encourage the entrepreneur to go into the business. We enabled the full foreign ownership of the companies in many sectors. We issued a family business law to ensure the continuity of this business in the country. We introduced many changes to the intellectual property system to ensure that there is safety environment for our innovators, and the testing for the patent have been reduced from 42 months to 6 months. We have issued a bankruptcy law very recently to ensure and to manage the bankruptcy procedures in a timely manner and effective so we can protect the rights of the business. We introduced a special course where you can make disputes and the trials in English. Okay. We have revamped the visa and residency system in the UAE. We introduced many types of visa types. One of the most popular one of them is the golden visa for 10 years. The aim was to attract and retain the talent, the investors, the scientists to come to the UAE and to do investment for a long time of period. We recently also issued the blue visa, and the main thing for it that we attract the specialists in the sustainability and the clean energy, which is aligned to our commitment to net zero. As a result, number of the registered companies in the UAE now, it is more than 1 million, compared to 400 when it was in 2020. In health, we have established Emirates Drugs Establishment, the aim of it to attract and R&D in this business, and also to regulate medical products, clinical trials, and biological banks. We issued a law to regulate the use of human genomes and in prevention, diagnosis, personalized medicine applications. At the same time, we maintain the privacy and the right of these individuals. We updated the law of donation and transplant of human organs, and we also try to promote the culture of donations, and that's why we have a saving of 600 million in the healthcare annually.
Let me just stop you there, because I think you've probably got a very long list that you could carry on with. You're talking about updating 70%.
75%.
75% of the laws, the regulations in this country in just 3 years. I don't think there's a single person in this room who would not see that as anything but an enormous, possibly insurmountable challenge anywhere else in the world. So I guess the next question to you, as we consider the UAE in its next decade, and what countries around the world could learn from here, is how do you measure the impact of those changed regulations? You've talked about public, private, academia, federal, state, city-states coming together. None of this is easy. The next question is, how do you measure that impact? And how do you work with, you know, the sort of collaboration that I see here with the World Economic Forum in ensuring that that work get done?
Actually now, Picky, we are in the early stage of measuring the impact of these regulations. We have numbers, number of investors, number of companies, easy of doing business, the international reports that give you some indicator about the impact of the legislation or the update that we did compared to 2020. This is now what we have, but now we are trying with many of the international organizations like WEF, like different organization, OECD, to develop a model of how to measure the impact of the regulations on different sectors, and we try to be a pioneer in this area. But the numbers that we have it now is mostly the indicator and the international reports, what they are saying about UAE now compared to before the pandemic.
And much of this is about business readiness,
Yes.
and much of this is about how you sort of go up in the rankings of business readiness, and none of that is going to happen without the regulatory framework being changed. And what I understand here is it's not about stacking regulation, it's actually about, you know, if you see regulation isn't having an impact, if it's regulation that isn't working, you're going to get rid of it, right?
Yes.
I mean, you'll come up with something else, which is, you know, I think a very unique opportunity here in the UAE. You've in your career helping African businesses and governments prepare for the challenges of today. There's a flip side to all of this. There is, of course, a danger as countries sort of, you know, are fully focused on sort of innovative, knowledge-based economies, adopting disruptive technology, that we will, you know, globally, effectively exasperate what are existing inequalities and enlarge the digital divide. I wonder whether you think a place like the UAE can help ensure that that doesn't happen going forward, and how?
It's a great question, and you know, my focus has been on studying agility, agile governance, and innovation. And the first thing that emerges, certainly in the comments of the ministers, is that the half-life of the skill set across industries, across sectors, has decreased. The skills that we have are changing constantly, and there's no doubt that one of the competitive advantages is going to be the mindset of the nation state that wants to remain competitive. And you have to give credit to the example that's being set, because the first is the mindset that is needed. So whether that's Africa, whether that's in other emerging markets or fast-growing countries, the mindset is the first point. What we're witnessing is actually this movement that we say worldwide is a movement from epistemology, theories of knowledge to ontology, theories of being. And so what the journey entails is really making sure that it's not the technology that is it at the end of the day. So in Africa, we have these examples of M-Pesa in Kenya and other examples where there was this leapfrog. What's interesting about the UAE journey that many turn to see as an example of where growth has been a success is this ability to manage multiple cycles. So you've been through several cycles. The challenge many countries are facing with this question of how to remain competitive when all countries are going after the same prize, a reskilled workforce, remaining attractive to investment. This is an anthropo economy. You want the world to be and see that this is a place to do business, to connect and to grow, is to be able to get into the cycle of continuous learning, whereby the innovation becomes embedded in the culture. And there's a couple of things to learn from that. The first is that getting into the education system at an early stage is the long-term win. But countries are going to face what we call the AI and frontier tech chasm. How you work through that? Artificial intelligence is the fastest adopted technology that we've known. It's faster than the rate of adoption of the internet. And the disruption that's going to come, particularly to service economies in terms of jobs, there's going to be a mismatch between that disruption and the reskilling and the retooling. How the leaders here and across this region go about reskilling and retooling is going to be fundamental to close the gap. And the challenge is internally putting the things in place to make sure that the UAE becomes the agile nation, the adaptable nation, where people realize that it's no longer preparing a workforce for jobs, because jobs are going to adapt, it's to solve problems. And those problems have to be grounded in value. So internally, this is the challenge. Part of the challenge you face, though, is what we call the neighbor challenge, the neighbor issue, that your success has to be able to help the regions around you, because that's where the challenge, the potential challenges could come. And this is a challenge on the African continent as well, where regionally you have to have your success, but also make sure that this is uplifting and you're creating stability and this betterment for everybody, because that ensures your continued stability.
How does that neighbourly perspective work here?
So I'll actually talk to both items, and I think you mentioned something, and we're at a pivotal point. We have undergone as a nation several changes, and I'll move to the neighborly because it fits in very well with it. We've undergone several changes pivotally, and it's intrinsically built into who we are to be adaptable. But it's a need. It was a need for transforming a nation. It was a need for growth. It was a need to be a small nation that has a footprint in the world. And to be within the global context and to be a good neighbor amongst neighbors. What we're looking at today is to convert from a need. We no longer need, but we want to continue the growth process. That's a mindset shift. That is a conscious understanding that growth, innovation, continuous adaptability becomes intrinsic to the fabric of who we are, because that's how we want it to be. And that, if I go back, and I'll peg it down to where education can play a role, it's in that transformation for an entire generation. It's a resetting and re-understanding of what purpose do we serve, how, and I love what you said, transformation into problem solvers, where jobs no longer become a problem, and continuous evolution then becomes intrinsically weaved into the fabric of society. When it comes to neighbors, what we look at is an opportunity. Intrinsically speaking, regardless of what we hear, it is a highly a region that has a lot of challenges. It's not easy, be it from a climate perspective, all the way to a geopolitical perspective. That being said, we naturally always traded with each other. We naturally always worked with each other. Most of us are family. There's interlinkages and bonds between us that is weaved within who we are. what we see here is a growth of any one nation actually pulls the entire value chain and value system forward. And that's a unique opportunity that this region provides that gives us a benefit on top of the challenge that you spoke about that usually exists elsewhere. It also opens up new opportunity windows as well to be able to spurt growth forward. And I always love the healthy competition that it also fosters, and that allows you to continue to enhance growth and always be at the cutting edge of what's better for the economy overall.
Miriam, can I ask you, we talked about 75% of regulations being updated in 3 years, and we're all exhausted by just even considering that. The work that you've done is intrinsic to the success that Sarah will have as she looks to revolutionize the education system here across the board. What happens next? What do you do, sort of not as an encore, because I mean your work continues on, but those first 3 years are done. You've talked about, you know, ensuring that you can see the impact, you can measure the impact. What hasn't been completed yet that you need to get done? And what can other countries, do you think, take as clear opportunities that you have seen through the work that your teams have been doing?
Actually, Becky, me, I'm a result-oriented person.
Clearly.
I finished.
We can attest to that.
Well, I reached the 75%, still I have 25%, so nobody can be taking relaxed. But the same thing, you know, we are working on it is, when you think about the normal way of how to do regulations and how to issue the regulations, we have also many of the new technologies is coming up and there is no regulations for it. We don't know how to tackle them, like the autonomous car or AI applications. So in the UAE still, we are in the early stages now to do we launched a parallel system for, it's called the legislative accelerator called RegLab. The concept of it is because you know that these areas, the new technologies, no one now have the comprehensive knowledge about the impact of them. So what we do in this RegLab or this regulation lab, actually we bring all the stakeholders and we have a safe and controlled environment. We grant an interim license for these technologies, and that's why we are trying also to attract investors in these areas to come to the UAE. So we give them the license, we give them a safe environment, we form for them all the teams that are relevant from all the authorities, the federal authority, local authority, whatever they need. We give them all, we empower them to do the testing and to see the result. So we see also what are the gaps we have. We need to regulate it. We write all the standards we need, and this is how we now tackling the new things that we are not doing it for the last years.
And I think Sam Altman at OpenAI talked about this being a sandbox for regulation, and there are opportunities there, and there are also some responsibilities as well, because as we develop these, even the thinking about regulation around AI and advanced technologies, I think there's a real responsibility. It could be things can be adopted very quickly because they're just out there without having the sort of the deep thinking that needs to be done. As you listen, Dan, sorry, go on, Sarah.
I think there's actually a piece that Mariam can speak about, which we evolved the way we look at legislations and drafting legislations to allow for that adaptability. One of them is a question that she always asks us: is this mechanism going to stay, therefore, consistently, and there's not going to be any changes on it, and therefore it remains in the law? If there is any instance that that's going to change, she will transform it into the bylaws.
Give me an example.
So I'll speak about the genome, which is one aspect that we did not have all the answers for. We today as a country are having 1 million genome sequence, unprecedented number that will go into drafting national health care, especially with regards to preventive medicine. The UAE has launched its reference genome, a first of its kind that covers parts of the global population that haven't been covered before. There are parts of genome research that we still have not tapped into. Those will go into the bylaws. What the law does is protects the use of that data, the mechanism and implementability of the data, but how it's going to be used in preventative healthcare will come in the bylaws, which is the utilization of the legislation of the law. Making regulations the framework by which you're able to build further policies and shape the growth of that sector. So that's something that's been quite an interesting mechanism that has allowed not only for you to test those regulations, but actually be comfortable with setting a regulation that intrinsically is adaptable in nature because the mechanism of how you approach the law versus the bylaw.
Danny, I think this kind of, where the UAE leads, others will follow is really, when it comes to regulation, is absolutely fascinating. And this is sort of, kind of a unique era here for the UAE. We talked about the opportunity, also the responsibility that comes with that. How do you assess what you're hearing here?
Yeah, no, a number of really important things were said in phrasings that the ministers articulated. It used to be that the point of economic development was so that humanity could better control their destiny and their environment. For that, humanity needed energy and it needed technology. We are now at a point where the nature of energy and technology are changing. And it used to be that you sent people off to university to learn skills so that they could operate machines better. We're not sending people to university to do that anymore. We're not sending people to university to better control their destiny in the first instance. We're sending them to university so that we have a landscape of jobs, so that social cohesion is maintained, income inequality is not off the chart, so that we have societies that function well. And that completely changes the equation. What we want regulation to do now is to be directed towards that goal of social cohesion. And the grand problems that humanity now tries to solve is not whether we can bring the food in from the hunt so that there is dinner on the table. It is, what do we do about our burning up the planet because of the global climate crisis? What do we do about the pandemic that will almost surely come again? What do we do about controlling the technologies like AI that, in the worst case scenario, are existential threats to humanity, but if not, they will still really terrible things. The nature of what we need to do to train people now is completely different. And when I hear the ministers here talk about their vision of how the UAE can lead, I'm heartened. I'm heartened by how in this part of the world that has the energy situation under control, that is looking to how it better takes care of its people, and looking to how it too can be part of the vanguard that solves these grand challenges of humanity. So I'm filled with hope, but I still think that we need a better term than never graduating. Because never graduating makes it sound like somebody failed, but that somebody keeps learning to do better at these challenges that are in front of us.
Can just build on that. Let's not underestimate the impact regulatory latency has on nations around the world. Regulatory latency prevents and stymies innovation, and you have to give credit to the ability to have agile governance, the ability to be able to get into what we call the innovation loop of being able to go through regulation and smartly building regulation so that it's adaptable. So regulatory latency and the way you've countered that is a huge example of the mindset that's needed, and testimony to the World Economic Forum's decade-long work on agile governance. But what it's also testimony to is how different departments in government share information, because to have this, you have to be able to share information. And so underlying that is data strategy, the ability for data to flow across departments to be used, to be turned into knowledge. This is the example for others to draw upon. Of course, finding their own unique ways to see how that makes sense in the different contexts. But the DNA of how to do that is great. And there's a link to the private sector. You know, Steve Jobs followed the principle of so-called Parkinson's law, which is the way information is shared in an organization, a region, or a country dictates or manifests itself in the products you create. If there are silos, your product would be siloed and disconnected from those that benefit from it. Here we see data being shared, cooperation to get this, what we call innovation hyperloop. And your legislation and legislative process is something for others to look to, because those that do not, for example, follow the AI adoption curve in which the legislation is halting it, will find themselves struggling for oxygen. And so that example is something for others to look at. Your challenge is to maintain that pace of innovation and see if you can continue to accelerate.
And I just wondered, and I was going to come to this as a last thought from perhaps both the ministers, agility is one thing, the challenge is the pace at which things are changing. How much does that keep you awake at night, Sarah? Because, I mean, there is a wholesale sort of disruption that you have been asked to sort of be responsible for. And it feels like this disruption is really noisy all the time. You know, how big a challenge is it to focus your teams on what is a very ambitious strategy when there is so much distraction around?
Focusing on what's important. And for the record, I can't live in an environment that's not noisy. So this is the normal habitat that I'm used to. But that being said, it's focusing on what's important. And for us, we continuously remind ourselves and our teams, the student is at the center of all of this. So the question that I always ask is, how is this going to benefit the student? How is this, in the long run, going to benefit the second question? The educator, to do their jobs better and equip the students. And if we don't have an answer to those two, it's relegated back to noise so that we can focus on what's important.
Let me just ask you, we've heard about, the vision for an innovative, knowledge-based economy here now for some time. We see that happening in front of our eyes. The facility that you provide through the regulatory work that you have done has been remarkable. Has your vision, I'll perhaps ask you both this, has your vision or has your sense of what an innovative knowledge-based economy looks like changed as you've been on this journey?
Not changed per se into what is needed to be able to achieve an innovative knowledge-based economy. It's changed in the context of where is it applied to, and where the focus area needs to be. And that's very important when you're actually working on continuously building not the knowledge-based economy part, but the innovative economy part. There is a continuous change journey. It's cyclical, and it requires you to redirect where you focus to be able to push the innovation forward. And it will change with time depending on what opportunities exist, what challenges exist, when you need to pick it up, especially with regards to government policy and strategies. When can it be left to the sectors to continue evolving and developing? So it's a very interesting and intricate system to be able to build a properly interconnected, innovative system, and that talks about the ecosystem as a whole.
There must have been resistance at times as you were on your journey to change the regulatory environment here. Last word to you. When asked what you've learned most on this journey, what's the answer?
I learned what is good for the business is good for our country. We listen to the people, we listen to the investors, we listen to the talents, and we fulfill their requirement. And this is what us as an official, this is our job to do. If we finish 75% of our regulation, for example, doesn't mean this is the end of it. Maybe the regulation that we issued last year technology comes, it changes, we have to change and adapt with it. And that's why during the journey of 3 years, there was a lot of resistance, yes. Sometimes from the ministers, sometimes from the local governments, but by the time they all know the vision of our leaders, why we are doing this one, and they are committed to it. Up it is much easier now. It's very much easier. They come to us. They want the laws to be updated or to be changed because there is a requirement. It is not being tackled. So, Her Excellency Sarah, she was mentioning, when we do a law, we try to make the law as simple as possible. We don't put it very complicated, and we put all the requirement or the criteria in it. That is difficult to change it. We try to make our regulations a robust system that can be adaptable with any new changes happening. And that's why we have a second level of regulations that is being issued by the cabinet, not by the country itself, which is more frequently updated than the law itself. This is what actually we have learned. I'm enjoying this journey. They are not enjoying. I don't
But it's only together that you'll get to the end of this journey.
I told you I'm a result-oriented.
Yeah.
They give me this task that I have to do it. Day, night, I don't care.
There's no end to her. Just saying.
Listen, it's been wonderful. I'm afraid we've run out of time and we could go on for much longer. But I think clearly the work that's been done with WEF, with the Global Future Councils, has been enormously valuable on this journey, and it's great to see the sort of work that's coming out of this. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in that, and the best of luck, because this is a journey. 31 doesn't feel as that far away, and it'll come very quickly. 71, of course, is the sort of ultimate vision at this point. It's been fantastic, and thank you both for your input.